A very pleasant good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Magandang umaga po, magandang tanghali, magandang hapon, magandang gabi. Wherever you're located and whatever your time zone is. Welcome to our Chronicles. This is Rita Gadi. My partner this afternoon is Bono ADAZA. He'll be joining us shortly. The title of our program is Sovereignty and or Sovereign Rights. We do not want to get into the debate that's presently ongoing among several individuals and specifically also between representatives of several countries as far as sovereignty and sovereign rights are concerned in the South China Sea. We're going to talk of sovereignty and sovereign rights in such a manner that it's a general scope actually. From the Constitution, where we invoke ourselves as a sovereign Filipino people, and of course to the representatives that we elect into office as the representatives of the sovereign power of the people. First, let's go into the definition. Sovereignty comes from that French word souverain, which means it is the supreme repository of power. It is the supreme power over a body politic. So I'm getting this definition not legally, or perhaps it is legally, but from the dictionary itself. That's the definition of that word sovereign, souverain. It is the freedom from external control. It is autonomous. It is independent. It is a strong sense of ownership over the body politic of a certain territory. It is the controlling influence. That is sovereignty. Sovereign rights, well, my partner will explain what are sovereign rights, the rights of a sovereign. Perhaps that is the best explanation I could give right now. So we have the sovereign. Who is the sovereign? The ruler, the head, the person that exercises the supreme power. Kaya pag sinasabi the sovereign king, the sovereign president, the sovereign dictator, the sovereign whatever. So it is not just himself that is bound by the law, because he's supposed to be making the law, so to speak, or he's the one that's supposed to define it or to declare it or whatever else you would attach to that word sovereign ruler. What is important here, it is the exercise of supreme political power over a state. Yun ang sovereign. So sovereign and sovereignty. Why are we discussing all of this? No, we're not discussing it in such a way as to add more definitions to the word, but we are going to talk about this because this is what the people ought to be represented. They are the sovereign people, and I have the Constitution here, which already defines in the preamble exactly what I am referring to when it says that we, the sovereign Filipino people. So yun ang first, those are the first words actually in the preamble. We, the sovereign Filipino people. And then of course there are a lot of other phrases that are attached to it, such as the aspirations, the dreams, what we want to promote, what we want to conserve. Ang haba-haba. That is why perhaps those that will write a new constitution could abbreviate this and just simply say, we the sovereign people, invoking the aid of the Almighty God or divine providence or however else we call the supreme being. We invoke his aid, and then this is the constitution we are writing. Wala na yung mga aspirations, etc., all of that, because all of these phrases and adjectives and adverbs and descriptions could already describe what is the meaning of a sovereign people. Kasi andun yung kapangyarihan sa tao. So lahat ng kanilang panaginip, lahat ng kanilang gusto, all the aspirations, all they want to do, etc. and all, andun na yon. Sila na. The power is with the people. Sila yung sovereign. Okay. And that is why when we look at it, if I really read the preamble, and that is why, that is why, and that is why. That is the reason we have always worked for a new constitution, because the constitution that we have now, which is a result of the so-called revolutionary constitution during the time of Mrs. Aquino, was rather verbose. Ang dami-daming salita, ang dami-daming words. And my partner, Bono ADAZA, and I have been working on this for quite a while to simplify it, to make it brief, so that we can actually memorize what it is, or possibly write it in poetic language if it is possible. But then, of course, I will get into trouble with the legalists, because the Constitution is supposed to be exactly what it is, the fundamental law. But that's precisely why it has to be brief and simple, concise, and exacting. So if I read it, the preamble, just listen to how it goes. We, the sovereign Filipino people, imploring the aid of Almighty God, in order to build a just and humane society and establish a government that shall embody our ideals and aspirations, promote the patrimony, promote the common good, conserve and develop our patrimony, and secure to ourselves and our posterity the blessings of independence and democracy under the rule of law and a regime of truth, justice, freedom, love, equality, and peace, do ordain and promulgate this constitution. Ang haba, ano? Ang daming salita, ang dami ng sinabi. In fact, this could already be just one whole page, come to think of it. So as we said, you can just say, we the sovereign Filipino people, imploring the aid of the Supreme Being, do promulgate this constitution. So lahat ng mga salita na kasama doon, na nakadikit doon, kasama na yon kasi sovereign people na nga tayo eh. That's exactly it. Anyway, so that is why we have to talk about what is the power of the sovereign people, the sovereignty that we hold. That is precisely why we do not want to go into all of the discussions that are actually going on now with the South China Sea, which has been renamed for purposes, for political purposes in a way, not even for diplomatic purposes, but that is the South China Sea, and that is, and they use the new definition of West Philippine Sea kasi banda rito na sa atin yan. Kasi kung South China Sea, it goes all the way up. Kung talagang tutuusin, all the way up to, I don't know, the sea. If you look at the waters, if you look at that navigational highway, which is known as the water system, coming from all the way up north, o saan galing yan? All the way sa Aleutian Islands, sa Vladivostok, bababa yan sa Korean Peninsula, sa Sea of Japan, etc., all the way down until here, the South China Sea, and now towards the western part of our country, kaya tinawag na West Philippine Sea. But whatever it is, that is the South China Sea, as it has been called from time immemorial. Now, if we go by the background of how all of this came about, there is also in our Constitution the definition of our territorial waters, or what we know as the Philippine Archipelago. How many times have I said it and quite emphasized it, that we are not just Philippine Islands. We are the Philippine Archipelago. And again, the definition of an archipelago is water with islands. So yan tayo. We are water with islands. Kaya bagay na bagay talaga pag-uusapan natin yung navigational highway na yan. Kasi even in the definition in the Constitution of territorial, na bang tawag dito, the national territory of the Philippines, in the beginning they just said, and all the waters within, enclosed, that is enclosed within the islands. So ito yung internal waters lang. Hindi pa pinag-uusapan yung mga waters na sinusukat from the remotest island that we have, both in the Philippine Rise, in the Pacific Ocean, tapos dito nga sa South China Sea. Be that as it may, let's go trace a little bit in history. Bono, are you already joining us? maybe Ver, you could start ringing him up and find out he was been able to adjust his. Oh, there, Bono, can you hear me? Anyway, so let me just go through this. When we had the Treaty of Paris in December 10, 1896, we were sold by Spain to the United States of America for $20 million. It did not include the islands that we're talking about now, the Paracels, the Spratlys, and everything else that's there scattered in the South China Sea. Whether or not they were part of the Republic of the Philippines, hindi sila sinama dun sa original, well, there is no other document except the original document of the Treaty of Paris. Wala yan. Kasi yung mga islands na yon, parang hindi pa talaga completely occupied ng kung sino-sino man or whatever it is, hindi na nadetalya. So that was 1896. And then sometime in 1946, when the United States of America granted us independence, wala silang pinalitan dun sa mga descriptions and sa mga dinagdag man o binawas man dun sa territory ng Republic of the Philippines. So, 1946, we were granted independence. Kung ano man yung nakasulat sa Treaty of Paris as the Republic of the Philippines, yun din ang nakalagay doon sa 1946 na nag-grant ng independence ang Amerika sa atin. And then we had the Treaty of San Francisco, which was, I don't have the date right now, but there was also no reference to any claims in any of those islands. Pero merong acknowledgement na tungkol sa the People's Republic of China at saka sa Taiwan. Andyan na yung pinag-uusapan na One China policy. Kaya yun na nag-umpisa yung mga usapan tungkol sa sovereign rights over certain islands, islets, shoals, rocks, whatever it's scattered there, dyan sa South China Sea. And then, of course, several other movements happened until we had the UNCLOS sometime in the 1970s to 1980s, where andun na yung nagkaroon tayo ng mga claims sa Bajo de Masinloc, Scarborough Shoal, lahat ng yan. Kasi meron ng sukat. Sinusukat na kung hanggang saan na ang teritoryo ng Pilipinas or whatever. So I'm doing this only just as a way of background, not to get into the fray of people debating kung hanggang saan talaga ang territory ng Pilipinas. Because what actually we are talking about here is we the people, we the sovereign people. Kaya yun nga yung title natin, Our Sovereign Rights and We as a Sovereign People. So, Bono, are you already there? Okay. That's Roxanne anyway. So Bono will be joining us shortly. He will still have to get his own camera so that we can actually see him. But Bono and I go a long way in the past. And some people remind me actually, tama na daw yung pinag-uusapan ko parating nakaraan. Kasi nakaraan na nga, tapos na. But you cannot help but go back in time every once in a while, especially if you have a person like Bono ADAZA, who has seen history from way, way back. And sometimes we do referrals to this because not by way of comparing, but by way of trying to establish where these things that are happening now coming from. So you have, for instance, the formation of our government. How did we become a sovereign state? We have several other aspects that we consider or take for granted today. But actually what is happening is they've come back. I mean, they have been part of the past that we had. So somebody has sent us a message na wag nang pag-usapan at balik-balikan na nakaraan. Well, I'm sorry to say that sometimes we have to go back because, like, for instance, we want a new constitution and we want to have a parliamentary form of government. Isa na lang ang ating legislative para hindi na yung dalawang chamber, merong Congress, merong Senate. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's even called upper house, lower house, ano ba yan? Well, it was called upper house and lower house because when Congress was in the old building, nasa taas yung mga senador, nasa baba yung mga congressman, kaya upper chamber, andun yung mga senador, lower chamber, andun yung mga congressman. So that was just geographically a reference to where this group of people were legislators were located. But we don't use that anymore, although sometimes we hear it. What we use now is Congress, the representatives actually, and then we have the Senate. All together, that is the legislature, and that is the Batasang Pambansa, as we would call it, which is the national legislative branch of government. But we keep on going back, as I said, to once upon a time in the 70s, President Marcos had first an interim parliament. Nag-testing muna in a way. So interim parliament, and then eventually elections were held for just one parliament. Ano yung parliament na yan? Isa lang. Wala nang Congress, wala nang Senate, isa na lang. And it happened. We were functioning then as a parliamentary form of government. And so if I go back to the time, it is because that is exactly what we would have included if we change our constitution to a new fundamental law. And Bono, my partner, most of the time I refer this to him because he was actually elected into parliament at the time. So he would be in a very good position to talk about it, to tell us how the experience was and how effective it could be as far as legislation is concerned. And of course, as far as limiting expenses and the budget for the legislative branch of government is concerned. So kaya bumabalik doon. If, for instance, I refer also to some portions of the Marcos administration, that is by way of merely just recollecting what it was during the time of the father of the president that we have today. Not by way of comparing, but just by reminding us that once upon a time, it was possible that we could be agriculturally productive in the sense that even rice, which is our staple food, was produced in abundance, that we were able to export it. So, reference to what happened then, kaya ang importante ay nababalikan natin kasi nagawa noon. So, bakit hindi pwedeng gawin ulit sa kasalukuyan? The sovereign people, yan, excuse me, kailangan sila ang talagang maggagawa ng ganyan. Nagawa na noong nakaraan, pwede pa rin na isagawa sa kasalukuyan. We have here an audio breakup with Attorney ADAZA who can hardly hear me. So he will join me na lang down next week with this webcam. Anyways, very sorry. Okay, so that's very sad. I was trying to get him as the other half of this program, as a matter of fact, so that he will be able to discuss with us exactly the meaning of sovereignty, we the sovereign people, and our sovereign rights. But be that as it may, we will go through this from a layman's point of view, which is from our point of view, and that would exactly emphasize the fact that we, the sovereign people, also have the power to design our own destiny in the same manner that we elect officials into government positions that are representing us as a sovereign people. Sino-sino yung mga yan? Well, this coming year, not this coming year 2024, but in 2025, we will be having elections for members of the Senate. Some of them are running for another term. Some are running again after they have had a break from the Senate. There may be new faces or new names that will be registering their certificates of candidacy for the Senate. And so in Congress, it is the same. Representatives from how many districts do we have throughout the country? But right now we have something like 300 plus representatives in Congress. That includes also those that belong to the party list. So nagkaroon tayo ng party list representatives sapagkat yung Constitution noong 87, nilagay na yan dyan na kailangan yung mga nagre-represent dun sa mga marginalized. Ay naku po. What a much abused word that is. Marginalized. These are supposed to be those communities who are not directly or even indirectly taken care of. Yung sinasabi nga nasa laylayan, bakit magkakaroon pa ng mga taong nasa laylayan na kailangan pa ng representative? if we are already electing into office a person who's supposed to represent that district. Remember, under the COMELEC rules, the districts contain something like 100,000 to 150,000 voters. In other words, pag ganun kadami na yung taong bumoboto, isang distrito na yan. So, what happens is, kung meron talagang gustong maghati-hati ng isang probinsya at yung kamag-anak, yung asawa, yung kapatid, yung anak, gustong tumakbo, ayun, hahati-hatiin nila. Basta merong 150,000 voters, that will become one district. Be that as it may, mahabang usapan yan. At malungkot nga na gano'n nangyayari sapagkat hindi na sana kailangan pa na bigyan ng mga representative, yung mga marginalized, sapagkat yung mga ating binoboto ng mga representative ng isang distrito, sila na rin ang kailangan na mag-alaga, lalong-lalo na dun sa mga nangangailangan ng alaga, which are supposedly the marginalized. So, we have something like 300 plus representatives in Congress now seated. So what's going to happen in 2025? Lahat yan either tatakbo for re-election. Meron din silang limit. 3 times lang silang pwedeng tumakbo. Kaya pagkatapos ng 3 terms nila, magpapahinga muna sila, either the wife, the mistress, the brother, the sister, kamag-anak, or a friend or so, will take over that particular position in that district. They will wait for a while, then they will come back. So whatever it is, ganyan ang mangyayari sa 2025. Either we have a great number of those running for re-election, or we will have new faces, new names, or another group of people pagkasakaling nadagdagan pa yung mga distrito. So other than those in the Senate and those in the House of Representatives, we will also have elections for the governors. And the governors, that includes the vice governor, and that includes the provincial board. The provincial board, it also depends on the number of population. Some provincial boards, kung maliit lang yung probinsya, ilan lang ang members ng board. Kung malaki, mas madami. But nonetheless, magkakasama yan. Governor, vice governor, provincial board. The provincial board is the legislative arm of the province. Okay? Magawa yan ng mga kanilang mga batas din on province-wise. And then we are also going to elect into office mayors. Governors muna. Yan, governors na nga yan sa provincial board, sa probinsya. Tapos, mga mayors. Mayor ng city at mayor ng municipality. So, pag mayor ng city, yan, meron din siyang sarili niyang vice mayor, city vice mayor. Meron din siyang city legislative board, meron siyang mga kasama, isang grupo din yan. So sa munisipyo, ganun din. Meron kang municipal mayor, meron kang municipal vice mayor, and then you have the council. Council ang tawag doon. City council sa mga cities, merong municipal council sa mga munisipyo. I don't know if the barangays will also be included in this election. I still have to do my research on that, so I cannot be very definite about it. But I think we just had recently the barangay elections, just about a month or so ago, so baka hindi pa sila kasali. Pero you must remember that the barangay is the smallest political unit of our country, and they also undergo election by the people. Yan ang sovereign rights ng tao, na pwede kang bumoto kung sinong gusto mo na mauupo sa posisyon na nakalagay na doon sa batas na kailangan sila ang magtatrabaho para sa atin at tutulong sa atin at gagawa ng kabutihan sa atin. At sila na rin ang mamamahala kung ano mga pangangailangan ng tao sa lahat ng bagay. So you have all of the, well, if you go by how it's defined, the 11 basic needs of a community, or 11 basic services that the community needs: water, power, food, clothing, shelter, electricity, power, transportation, recreation, sports, medical services, medical facilities, recreation, justice system, peace and order. Ang dami niyan. All of this, 11 or so, or even more, are the basic needs for a community to survive. They're also the basic services that the officials that we elect into office should provide for us. Saan tayo ngayon? Tayo yung sovereign power. anong mangyayari kung hindi ito dumadating sa atin? You see how it is. We have problems now with our water system. For instance, ang taas-taas ng kubra sa tubig at hindi naman talaga nasa sapat ang distribution ng tubig. Merong kinakailangan na mga lugar na ganito ang kanilang gagawin, etc. and so forth. There is a lot of services that ought to have been done by government kasi nag-i-elect nga tayo ng tao dyan. Pero ito, na-privatize na. Mga private corporations na nagpapalakad ng basic service na yan. That's another argument, another item that we will discuss perhaps in the future. And then the same thing goes with energy and power. That is no longer controlled or held or managed or administered by government. You have private corporations also that handle this, although we have a Department of Energy, we have all sorts of other subsidiaries and collateral agencies attached to energy. Ano ba yan? Now we're going into what? Into alternative sources. Ang tagal na yan, my God, dekada na yan na pinag-uusapan, alternative sources of energy. Okay, so what am I referring to? We, the sovereign people. Yung sabi ko nga, ano ba yung definition ng sovereign? We have the supreme power over the body politic. Tayo yan. But are all of these needs and services coming to us after we elect our sovereign representatives? So that was the discussion that we would have extended this whole afternoon together with my partner. But nonetheless, let's get back to what it means to be a sovereign people. So I was referring now to the elections that will be forthcoming in 2025. We go through this exercise, if we would call it, or we go through this act of suffrage, which is an act of the sovereign people, which is a sacred right, which is a responsibility, which is an obligation to God, country, and people, an obligation to God that we choose the right men and women, an obligation to the country that the people that we will put into that office by our ballot, one vote, can you imagine, is already enough to be able to say that we are going to be represented in those offices that I had just mentioned. So, what is going to happen when we have actually elections every so many, we have a period for this, as I said, a regular period for it that is already defined by law. Meron talagang mga nakatakda na mga taon at buwan kung kailan magkakaroon ng exercise ng act of suffrage, the act of voting, the act of voting. Kasi sinasabi nga na mahalaga yung balota. There was a time it was even described as a sacred ballot. Bakit? Sapagkat nilalabas mo sa sovereign power mo sa ibang tao na yun ang ilalagay mo doon para gumawa ng tama para sa'yo. So can you imagine, for God, for the people, and for the country in general. So 2025, that is what we expect to happen. But is that what happens every time we have an election? We have seen how, well, in the past, pag sinasabi nga traditional politician, you know, it's not a derogatory term. Kasi kung iisipin mo yung mga traditional politicians, ano ibig sabihin traditional? Yung mga politicians noong unang panahon. Well, if you look at the profile of the members of the Senate, you look at the profile of the members in Congress, just several decades ago, ibang-iba sa mga representatives sa kasalukuyan. Oh, there is really such a big difference. Whenever there would be a budget debate on the General Appropriations Act, for instance, you had the exceptional qualities of people in this legislative branch of government who really do their research and their studies as far as the budget is concerned, that they know would be going to the different departments of government that will be serving the sovereign people. Talagang matindi ang mga debate na yan. Pero naging panipis na ng panipis yung discussions tungkol dyan. As a matter of fact, pabilisan na nga. so that as soon as the budget coming from the Office of the President is submitted, halos wala na masyadong diskusyon. A little question here, a little question there, and then like it's what has happened just recently and in the past administrations, before the end of the year, tapos na yan. There were times when the discussions on the budget even extended up to the early mornings of the day, sapagkat even only for one department, for instance, ang haba talaga. Masinop ang kanilang pag-aaral kung ano yan. I'm not trying to rate any of our legislative members in Congress and the Senate, but what we can just go by way of historical perspectives. And there has really been some, well, as you would call it, there has been, I don't want to use that strong word, a deterioration, but there has been some, well, major, anyway, I will look for an adjective that could best describe how it is, because sometimes we really cannot gauge the quality of a person's mind. And we cannot really give, for instance, a grading system for the excellence or the non-excellence, for the intelligence or the stupidity, for the brilliance or the ignorance of members of those who are debating or discussing or looking into the General Appropriations Act. So it is not for me, for instance, to make any judgment on this, but it is up to you now to consider how vital it is for each and every one of you as a sovereign citizen with all the powers that are with you. Nasa sayo ang karapatan at nasa sayo ang responsibilidad. Nasa iyo ang obligasyon na suriin ang mga taong tumitingin sa mga iba't ibang mga bagay na gagamitin para sa atin din, para sa sovereign people din. But sometimes, kasalanan din na pabaya din tayo. We do not really go into the serious, solicitous study of the people that are supposed to represent us. We go by the name, we go by the popularity. Yun nga ang malungkot. It becomes no longer the principles that they stand for, but they go by the popularity. It is a personal thing. It's a personification of the person, personification of the character of that person. No longer the ideal that we are supposed to have as the common tao. Yung sinasabi nga ng ating junior president ngayon, panaginip ninyo ay panaginip ko. Hala. So, ano ba yung panaginip natin? We, the sovereign people, the sovereign Filipino people, what are your dreams that you would want now to impart that could possibly be embodied by the person whose name you will check in your ballot? But then again, huwag kayong magmadali. Kilala naman ninyo yung mga pangalan. Alam naman niyo yung mga personalidad. Talaga bang sinisiyasat natin yan? That's the work of the sovereign people, delegating to the people that we will elect into office the powers that will be controlling our lives in many ways. Nasabi ko na nga yung lahat ng mga basic needs and services. Imagine that. Lahat ng yon, itong mga taong ito na nilalagay natin sa ating balota, sila magkakaroon ng control dyan. That is our sovereign power. That is our sovereign right. But are we exercising it properly, the way it should? Naku po, pinag-uusapan nga ng isang araw lang. There was a media brief conference that junior president had. And you could see how exasperated he sounded when he said, ang bigas yan talaga ang malaking problema. Hindi na makatulog nga gawa sa pag-iisip kung paano nga maibababa ang presyo ng bigas at lahat ng yan. Ang daming kailangan natutukan, hindi lang yan. Hindi na nga siya natuloy sa isang conference na pupuntahan sana niya sa Dubai. Mahalaga yung pupuntahan niya doon, yung COP28. Ito yung mga meeting ng mga iba't ibang bansa at kasama na naman ng ASEAN dyan tungkol sa climate change at sa climate mitigation. At lahat ng bagay na naaapekto ng buong mundo, ilang beses na sila na nag-meeting-meeting dyan. Simula pa ng malaking dramang ginawa ng mga malalaking bansa. Kasama tayong mga maliliit. Yung sinasabi nila na, ngayon, yung mga industrialized, highly industrialized nations, kailangan multahan sila sapagkat sila nagbubutas ng ating stratosphere, hindi lang atmosphere, stratosphere, isa pang sphere sa taas doon. Nabubutas na yan, kaya nga nagkakaroon ng tinatawag na global warming. May mga nagsasabi nga, yung climate change na yan, well, climate change and all of these things about the environment and our ecology, it's been there from the beginning of time. But in the beginning of time, we had forests, we had clean waterfalls, we had rivers that were running through our fields, we had irrigation that we just had to tap from all of these rivers, we had the oceans that were clean. Kaya hindi pa apektado yung ecology, yung environment ng dumi at kasalanan na ginawa na rin natin. Kaya nagkakaroon tayo ng tinatawag nga na disturbances ng nature. Nature gets back at us in many ways. Anong sasabihin na the warming of the waters? You know, sometimes we just read about it, but I'll tell you how important it is. My good friend, who was governor and also representative of Tawi-Tawi, for instance, he was a member also of the parliament at one time and member of Congress and also a legislative representative of his people sa Tawi-Tawi. Well, during his term, there was already that ship that was studying kung bakit nga yung tubig doon sa karagatan, this is in southern Philippines, ay talagang iba na ang temperature, iba na ang timplada. So that even the stilt houses, hindi ba nakikita natin bahay ng mga samal, mga badyaw, ay talagang nahihirapan ng ayusin sapagkat umiinit na nga yung tubig. Yung mga corals, nagbi-bleach na, nasisira na. It is the warming of the water. So, as early as several years back, apektado na rin doon yung gawa ng climate change because of the warming of the waters. Marami nga nagsasabi in the northern part, for instance, the melting of the icebergs, etc., nakaka-affect yan. But what is really most dangerous ito? Yung pollution ng exhaust ng mga industrialized countries, na yung usok na yon hindi naman na-filter yon, tumatama na yon dun sa clouds kung saan yun sana yung ulan na magbibigay ng tubig para sa ating mga tinatanim. Pero acidic na, meron ng lason. So nakita nyo how important it is. Yung meeting sana sa Dubai na pupuntahan ng ating presidente, talagang mahalaga sapagkat sila ang kailangan magkulit doon sa mga highly industrialized countries. Ay ingatan ninyo yung inyong pollution sa atmosphere, sa stratosphere, sa sphere, sa taas dyan at lahat. Ngunit what we heard as far as their deliberations are concerned, parang meron na yata silang napasa na resolusyon na kailangan magbayad yung mga na hindi nakakaabot ng 1.5 degrees na sinasabi nga sa pollution, yung mga bansa, yung mga lugar na hindi nakaka-control ng kanilang masamang klaseng toxic fumes at pollution, kailangan bayaran nila yung mga bansa na naapekto ng kanilang, I don't want again to use that word, pero napakasarap sabihin sa Tagalog, kanilang kawalanghiyaan tungkol sa kanilang mga exhaust. Anyway, so that was it. I think that was one of the items that was positively presented and would be pursued. So yun ang hindi nga napuntahan ng ating Pangulo sapagkat nagkaroon naman ng hostage crisis sa Red Sea. Biruin nyo, 17 seafarers na Pilipino na hostage doon. Pero napakawalan na rin at naayos na rin. Ngunit, with a crisis like that, and of course, many things that are needed as far as his attention is concerned, kasi magtatapos na ang taon, at yung budget ay napatapos na sa Kongreso at saka sa Senado. They already had what they call the joint meeting of representatives from the two houses, so that now it will be presented to the president. So kailangan din yan ay masiyasat ng husto ng kanyang opisina at siya rin mismo. He will also have to look over what has already been approved, although it came from him, but he would want to check once again before he signs this into law. That is the General Appropriations Act. Yun na nga, we the sovereign people, tayo ang naglagda ng mga taong nilagay natin dyan para pag-usapan yan. At sabi nga natin, kinakailangan na yung malaking obligasyon natin ay matutupad nitong mga tao who are supposed to represent us in those offices. So, we speak of, yan, kasasabi nga lang ni President Jr., itong ating agricultural sufficiency, nakalagda na siya ng isang Secretary of Agriculture na sanay naman sa fishing sapagkat yun ang kanyang negosyo dati at nag-relinquish na nga siya niyan. Ngunit alam niya ang mga pangangailangan ng fisher folk at ng mga farmers. Kaya yan ang kailangan tutukan sapagkat hindi lang basta sa sinasabi nga na magbibigay ka ng mga farm implements at lahat ng yan. Ano ang kailangan pa? Buo yan eh. It's a whole package na ibibigay sa ating agricultural production. Plus, of course, yung ating mga farmers. You have the agrarian reform, yan pa. Isa pa yan na batas na medyo luma na at medyo kailangan ayusin na. In the beginning, masarap pakinggan. Land to the landless, kaya bigyan ng 7 hectares. Pagkatapos nun, ano naman ang magagawa ng 7 hectares? Siguro sa kanyang pamilya lang at sa kanyang mga kapitbahay at saka sa palengke lang. But if you're talking of the entire country and you have all of these little plots of land, paano ba yan na 7 hectares dito, 7 hectares, so makakabigay ng agricultural production sa atin? So, marami nga nagsasabi na siguro kailangan ipagsama-sama na ulit yung mga lupain na yan. Ang may-ari, yung mga farmers, ngunit isang kooperatiba sila or what they call corporate farming. Kung hindi na, because the cooperatives before, parang hindi natuloy na maayos ang palakad. Nasubukan na rin yan. In fact, we had several of our experts that were sent to Israel to study the kibbutz system. Ang dami rin pinadala sa People's Republic of China para makita yung manual work na ginagawa ng mga tao, ng mga Chinese sa kanilang mga farms, kaya lumaganap. So, lahat na yan napag-aralan. So ngayon, ang kanilang pinopropose, ang pinag-uusapan, baka pwede ipagsama-sama ulit and let the private sector come in. Silang may pera, silang mga bilyonaryo, silang mga malalaki. Pwede silang tumulong sa management and administration ng tinatawag nga na corporate farming para magkaroon lahat ng tulong at yung mga farmers masisweldohan. Hindi na basta percentage na lang ang kita kung ano man ang kanilang nabenta na palay at lahat na yan. Paano habang hindi pa nagka-harvest? Where will they get their sustenance? So yun. All these details, kailangan yan dun sa agriculture. I won't go into those details, but yan kailangan tutukan talaga. That, of course, is interrelated to industrialization sapagkat yung mga agricultural products na pwedeng industrialize, pwedeng i-manufacture gaya nga, kamatis, gawing ketchup, etc. and all of this. Mais, ang daming derivatives ng mais. The coconut industry, ang dami ring derivatives ng coconut. Can you imagine? Even lahat for facial, for soap, for cooking, for many things. Yan. Diyan manggagaling ang . So all of these are part of that agricultural program and industrialization. Magkasama yan, magkadugsong. At doon din, ang continuation niya, yung malalaman kung ano talaga ang mga products na merong nutritive value. Para yon ang makakatulong naman sa bawat tao, tayo, the sovereign people, ang pagkain natin ay sapat para malakas ang ating katawan, vegetables, etc., whatever. And also all sorts of other agricultural products and fishing products and all of this. And then, of course, that would lead on to what we can export, etc. And that, of course, is important for the conversion of our farms and many other things. Infrastructure, likewise, is so important. So all of these are related in the sovereign rights of we, the people, where the sovereign representatives that we elect into office are the ones who ought to be doing their service for us. Yan ang mahalaga dyan. Yan ang sinasabi natin, sovereignty and or sovereign rights. Oo nga. Can you imagine the beginning of our fundamental law? We, sana ba yung aking dito? Kodigo. Kasi kumuha ako ng libro dito na sinasabi nga, we, the sovereign Filipino people. Ang lakas ng dating yan. Nasa atin ang kapangyarihan. The very definition of sovereign. See? The supreme power over the body politic. Tayo yan. So bakit nagkakaganito ang paghihirap ng marami na hindi naman nabibigyan ng kinakailangan na serbisyo ng mga tao na nagre-represent sa atin? You see? Anyway, it's a long process if you call it. It's hoping for the best if you would consider it in such a manner. But many things to get into this. When I will have my legal partner together with me, hopefully by next week or thereabouts, he will have his camera already installed and you will see exactly Bono ADAZA. Then we can now talk about the sovereign rights of the sovereign people. Hindi lang sa, yung South China Sea, yan ang parating sinasabi, may sovereign rights tayo dito, meron may sovereignty tayo. It actually encompasses everything in our lives. And that's exactly what I have been emphasizing in this close to an hour. And that is why each and every one of you viewing this and listening to this would realize we hold the power of our future in our hands. In the ballot that we are going to cast in 2025. Kung ano man ang ating pagkukulang nung nakaraang eleksyon dito sa mga taong nagre-represent sa atin, ituwid na natin sa darating na 2025. Panuorin yung mabuti, pakinggan, suriin itong mga tao ngayon. We are a country that talks too much. Kwento ng kwento, salita ng salita. Yung mga hindi dapat na gamitin na political, na legal issue, kagaya nitong pinagkakaguluhan kung papayag ba tayo na itong International Criminal Court na taga-ibang bansa ay papasok dito sa Pilipinas. Kasasabi ko lang dito, we the sovereign people. Ang ibig sabihin niyan, we are freedom from external control, sovereign. We are independent of any control other than by ourselves. So hindi na kailangan pang gawing political issue yan. It's not even a legal issue. It's now being used as a political issue. Mag-iimbita ka, ang papapasukin mo ang ibang grupo ng tao na mag-iimbestiga dito sa atin. The first act of our sovereignty is the independence of our courts. Ang gagaling, nako, ano ba yung sukat na ginawa nila for every square meter of our country, merong isang abogado. Imagine that. Sa laki ng ating territorial sovereignty, bawat square meter merong isang legal mind. Bakit ba tayo kukuha pa ng iba galing sa ibang bansa? Natuturuan tayo o mag-iimbestiga dito sa atin. Anyway, that's another topic altogether. But it is so fundamental and it is so simple. All you have to do is consider the subject and the predicate. We, the sovereign people, promulgate this fundamental law. Now, we are sovereign, meaning that we are superior. We have the superior power over our body politic. Tayo yon ang may karapatan. Kayong nakikinig sa akin yan. Hindi yung representative ninyo sa Congress, hindi yung representative na na binoto ninyo na mayor, na vice mayor, o anumang posisyon. That is just the title of the representative of you. The power. You are the power. Yun. Yun ang ibig sabihin nitong ating programa sa kasalukuyan. Nakalimutan na natin yon. Tingnan natin ang malaking bagay na nasa ating mga nasa isip, nasa ating gawa, at andito sa ating mga puso. In our hearts, in our souls, in your spirit. Yan ang mahalaga dyan. In your free will, na meron kayong karapatan na magdesisyon. Panaginip ninyo ay panaginip ko. Hear the President, kasasabi lang niya yan. So it is your dream that he speaks about. So let it be true. Follow through with that dream. Hold into account yang mayor na hindi pa natatapos yung karsada ninyo, yung mga lahat of so many violations of the law. Bakit? You are the sovereign power. Why will you allow that to be violated? All the services that you deserve. Na-mention ko na lahat ng yan. Plus, of course, the service for the care of your individual person. Body, mind, and spirit. Yung tamang pagkain, wastong pagkain, at merong pagkain at kayang bilihin. Yung klase ng edukasyon, oh, by the way, we have to commend the Department of Education now with a very high rating and a very high percentage of approval. Plus many things that will have to be included likewise dyan sa mga curricula at sa mga iba't ibang mga nilalagay sa kanilang sa kanilang mga anong tawag nito, lahat ng yan. So ang mahalaga dito ay unang-una, kayo ang may kapangyarihan. You are the power and you are the ones that can decide your future because kayo ang merong panaginip na magandang kinabukasan. So be that as it may, as I've said, we have all of this right at the palm of your hands, at your fingertips. When you mark your ballot, alamin ninyo, ito bang taong ito ay gagawin ang katuparan ng aking panaginip. So we have some messages here. Andres Teves, no foreign policy, no matter how ingenious, has any chance of success. It is born in the minds of a few and carried in the hearts of none. He is quoting Henry Kissinger. Well, let your mind be the one that will carry this through. So we have traditional lawmakers before martial law were full of wits, tact, high-caliber intellectuals deserving the title called honorable. Ibalik natin yan. Hindi sa kanila, sa inyo. Are you honorable enough to stand your ground and say, this man that I'm putting into office will give me the honor I deserve? Yan, Andres Teves. Jean Jagger, good afternoon po. I'm watching from the United Kingdom. Aquan, maayong hapon, Ma'am Rita. Maayong hapon din sa imo, Narciso, Olaira Hernandez, good PM, and several others. And all of those have been sending us messages. There are those who are making comments, and I've read them while our program has closed. But be that as it may, I'd like to thank you all for having joined us. Hopefully, by the next time, we can really have an honored guest. So remember this, sovereignty resides in the people. Your sovereign right should be exercised, not just in the South China Sea, but for every department of your government that you put into office. Thank you for having joined me. This has been your Chronicles.